Just
Yeah.
Google you on
All
YouTube.
right. So here we go. This is another episode of Brave Indigenous Conversation with Joan Jack. And today we have Khudeishéexh, and I'll be starting the way I always start. I mean, I'm not sure. I should have checked, but I think this is episode maybe 25. I like to start by reading a piece of writing that was done by a woman, Mickey Scottby Jones, a Black woman from the United States who's gone to the spirit world now. And this is what she had to say: an invitation to a brave space. Together we will create brave space. There is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we all have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. And that really touched me. I mean, I think you were there, Khudeishéexh, when that was first introduced to our community through a nonviolent communication event. Anyways, I'd like to start by asking you to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Okay, goodness geez for having me on today, Auntie. My name is Khudeishéexh. So Khudeishéexh Yuchatawasuk. Tlingit Shawat on Atlin Ani Shawat Chasiti Ka Yenyedi Nachsititu. So my name is Khudeishéexh, and I'm from the Taku River Tlingit First Nation, and I'm from the Yenyedi clan. I'm so happy to be here with you today, Auntie. I love the conversations that you spark, and the thoughts that get unconcealed, and the way that we get to explore together in conversation is one of my favorite things about you. So I'm very happy to join you today.
Ah. And what else can you share about who you are? Because I know you as amazing. So like we could talk all day about what you're doing, what you're up to. So
Okay.
what's top of mind for you these days?
Um, well,
Mm.
I'm a mom of three beautiful children. I have a 9-year-old little girl, Mia, and a son, Mikeso, who's 7, and another son who's 4. And I live up in the Yukon in Whitehorse. Um, and I'm a mom of 3. I also work for Children of the Taku Society, and we have a mission to revive our Tlingit language. Our language is our dialect is considered sleeping right now. We don't have any speakers in our nation. So um, Gaetacha Jack started a movement to revive our language, and we all kind of jumped on board. And now we have a whole crew committed to it. I'm the lead teacher for our classroom, which is our pilot cohort. That's, we're creating the curriculum and then testing it out on this pilot cohort. And then I'm creating the teaching material so that people who come up behind us and want to teach this curriculum have it all mapped out for them. So it's a very interesting, challenging, and exciting process to be the one who is learning the lesson on my own the week before, and then teaching it, finding, like, we have a structure for teaching, but just fine tuning it, finding a way to deliver it in a way that people can pick it up and run with it. And so that really keeps me on my toes. Every week is a hard deadline, so keeps me real motivated. And and then I've also just recently taken on leadership for our community dance group out of Atlin. And I've found a way. One thing I'm always looking at is how I can create my life to fulfill all the things that matter to me. And so being a mom really matters to me. Reviving my language really matters. Having my kids feel like they're part of a community, and my community's health and well-being and healing really matter to me. And so my experience is often there's not enough time being a mom
Mhm.
of 3 and on the go. And so I'm finding ways that I can just create my life to have that overlap so all those things get fulfilled. And that's why I stepped up for the dance group, because we're creating it as a language domain for people who want to speak the language. They can come and speak, and I'll be their translator. And, a place where everybody matters and everybody has a role, and anyone who wants their language has access to it. Like, it just fulfills all those things. And my kids get to be part of their community. And so it's a big commitment, but finding a way to fit it in too.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think we have to mention Yanda Kanyeth and Mama Ya'a, who I remember when Wayne started the group, when Yanda Kanyeth started the dance group. And Watsait, my husband Brian Jack, and I have been a part of it since practically the beginning. I'm not sure if we were there right at the beginning, but pretty close. And like you said, dance group, what Wayne and Deb have done is created a space where everyone does matter. The dance group involves and includes anyone who shows up, regardless of whether they're Tlingit or not. And they have a deep understanding. They don't objectify it, or like in terms of articulating their cultural understanding. It's just a way of being, that we are inclusive as Indigenous people at our core. And colonization and threats to that have caused us to be a little bit cautious, understandably, or even defensive. But the dance group in Atlan, in my experience, as someone who's not Tlingit by blood, has always been a safe and welcoming space. And it's nice to see that you're stepping into the leadership role, because for years Yana Kanyeth has been saying, could somebody else please do this? Could somebody else please do this? And then, of course, really it's Mama Ya'a, his wife Deb, who keeps him organized behind the scenes. Like, I think without her, half the time, whatever, they're a team. They're a real team. So it's good. It's good to hear you describe it as an inclusive space. Yeah.
Yeah, they've created such a strong foundation for the dance group. I know I was looking into it, and they have been running that dance group for 18 years. Yanda Kinyej came back 18 years ago and found that, needed to have a space for that inclusivity, a place where culture is alive and thriving and people always feel welcomed. And that was one of my first landing spots. So when I moved away, I moved away when I was 4, and I have like just a few really incredible memories of being a child in the Yukon. And I always said, when I have my own kids, I want to move home. And so it wasn't until 2012, and I decided that it was time to come home and work for the nation for a summer. And I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no personal connections to people in the community. I just took a course, took the Landmark Forum, and decided I want to discover who I am. And so I called the nation and I said, can I speak to the chief? I had no idea what I was doing. And I'm like, I'm a member, but I want to come home and I don't know how. And so anyways, they gave me a job for the summer working with the healing ceremony gathering around the fire that was held in Delu. And I got to get connected to everyone and had no idea what I was getting into. But as soon as I came home, 2 of the first people there were Yanda Kinyej and Mami Ya'a. And they're like, come into the dance group, come out on the land with us. Here, let us help you make regalia. They helped me with my first blanket. They gave me a sense that me coming home mattered.
Yeah.
And I want to continue that. They've put so much work into that, and it has changed my life forever. I'm certain that the ties I made that summer, with you and what said Uncle Brian, just that welcoming experience that I had a home and I had a place in that home, Even
Mhm.
though I've been away so long, that's got to continue. That's how we're going to keep our
Mhm.
nation strong. And so
Mhm.
I just feel so blessed that I was welcomed home in that way, that INDIGENOUS trusts me with the leadership and continuing that with the dance group, that I can, step into those shoes and with his
I'm
support and Mamia's too.
so excited. Yeah, I remember when you came home and Brian and I were like, wow, okay. Because some people come home and everybody has a different experience when they come home. I'm sure every in the context of the dance group and what Yandakanyeth and Mamayaa create and hold for us um, in the Tlingit community is the same for everyone. Everyone's welcomed,
Mhm.
and for whatever reasons, people find their place at the heart of the community or at the periphery of the community, and many people. And it's not just we're talking about T'aakú Kwáan right now, but it's the same everywhere. My home community of Barons River, we probably have, I'm guessing, maybe 2,000 people on reserve and another, I don't know, maybe 1,500 in Winnipeg or all over the world or wherever they are. And so everyone has this yearning for home. I mean, I don't live at home, but the yearning for home is so strong. I can relate to what you're sharing. Like I moved our whole family and household back to Barons River 2002, I think it was 2002 or 2003. And Brian built a beautiful log home that my nephew and brother stay in, whatever in Barons still. But yeah, the returning home journey and what we create in that space is different for everybody. But you've been such a joy and relentless. Relentless.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't easy at all times, It
Mhm.
really took something like coming home. I was so intimidated because I was put in this role where my title was healing coordinator. And I'm like, how is an outsider from the city, little city folk, gonna come in here and be like, I'm going to heal? Like, I was embarrassed by it, like having that role. I'm like, who am I? And so I just went in with open ears. I'm like, I have no idea what it's going to take for people to experience healing, but I want to be the vessel for it. Like, I want to hold space where
Mhm.
whatever people need, I can make that happen. Because I don't have the answers, but I do have an ability to listen for what's needed and then
Mhm.
support people in fulfilling that. And so when I did come home, I I started by knocking on every single door at 5 Mile and down in the village and introducing myself, and I was, like, so shy at the time. I wasn't who I am today, but had to overcome that to introduce myself, and some people were really welcoming and open arms and happy to see me, and some people were not. And and, um, and I specifically remember one member coming up to me and saying, "You don't belong here. Like, go home. I don't know who you think you are." Like, very confrontational. And I was like, "I'm so sorry you feel that way." And
Mhm.
we have like gatherings every week. I would love to see you there. I will never come to one of your gatherings. Like, very, very clear communication. And then I just kept inviting him and kept getting no's. And it wasn't until we had a big welcome home dinner after gathering around the fire, and he came to that. And then he came after and he said, "I'm sorry that I said those things to you. Like, thanks for sticking around."
Mhm.
And that was like,
Mhm.
made it all worthwhile.
Mhm.
That response that you get from some people, it's not about me. It's just what I represented to him at the time.
Mhm.
Move through that and keep showing up and
Yeah.
being consistent and holding space and not making it personal or getting defensive and just hearing people and letting them have those emotions. My experience is that passes, and you
Yeah.
can, you can make progress and you can
Yeah.
experience healing.
Yeah. Also, what you bring up for me is my understanding of how belonging occurs over time. regardless of blood. Like blood is one component from my point of view. Like life's full of stories. Like one time I was talking, for a short period of time I hung around with Art and Joyce Wambady from the Sioux Valley First Nation. I don't know how our lives ended up crossing, but they were elders already, and I spent a basically a summer with them around 1990. And one time I said to Art, what do you think about, what do you think about non-Indigenous people, or, the blood thing and belonging and all of that? And he laughed and he said, some of my best Lakota friends are white people. He said, it's a way of life. It's a way of life. And, that's, I think, still a truth. It's not the truth, but it's an Indigenous perspective. And I just wanted to share another story from my own life around that, because as an outsider or someone without the blood, it has been challenging for me. It has been very confronting, challenging. Well, I could say a lot about it, whatever. But we were down in the Nakana, and I was on the floor, I was washing the floor, and I was crying. And because the rejection, I personalized it, like you said. I didn't have the skill at that point in my emotional development to not personalize someone else's view of me. And so I had personalized the rejection so deeply that I was actually considering suicide at that point. It was in 1998. And I just felt so bad and like I wrong and just horrible. It messed me right up. And then your uncle was leaving the cabin down there. They were cutting, him and Douglas and Lester, his brothers. They were cutting logs for our expansion at that time. That was like 1998. And one of his sisters, I won't say her name because I don't have permission, but she was doing dishes. And I heard Brian say to her, like very softly, watch her. Like he meant like to take care of me, so I didn't go take my life or something. And so she just shook her head at him. I happened to see them out of the corner of my eye. And then he got out the door, and then the door had barely, closed, and she was wiping her hands with that dishcloth, and she came over to me. She's quite a short, powerful Tlingit woman, and she said, get up right now. And I was like, all snotty and crying and, I'm no good and whatever. And so I stood up. She said, you know what's wrong with you? I said, what's wrong? You're a big baby. And I was like, now I can laugh, but I was so confronted. And she said to me, you just got here. We don't even know you. We don't even know who you are. So stop crying about it. And so I've thought about that moment. Like at that point in time, I had been married to her brother for 7 years. I had been living in the community 7 years. But from her point of view, I had just arrived. I had just got there. And as time has gone on and I've grown emotionally, and I can really value that. Like I can really see from an Indigenous perspective, because our world is relational. It's all about relationship and responsibilities within those relationships. So it's not about rights, you know? So when we show up, you know, I have a right to be here because I'm married to Brian Jack. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eh?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I want to go down this rabbit hole anymore. But
Yeah.
you've made such a difference because you're such a joyful, um, you're such a joyful, brave, free person, you know? Yeah, intentional. I see you living an intentional life, purposeful life. I want to tell one story that maybe I shouldn't, but and then we'll go back to you about your language work, because your dad told it. Your dad told it in the language class, and he didn't say don't tell, you know. So I'm assuming it's okay to share what he shared because I thought it was so profound. We were talking about in a checkout in the language class, in a checkout circle, we were talking about what being in the language class meant to us, and the impact it was having on our lives. And he said, I want to share with you what happened the other day. He said, I was watching my daughter, Genoa, with her boy, and she was cooking supper, and he went and wanted something like a small child would. And she said to him, I told you I'm cooking supper right now. I'll be with you as soon as I'm done getting supper ready. He went away for a little while and he came back again. Mom, I already told you I've got to make supper for everybody, the whole family kind of thing, not just you. I'll be right there. And he went away again. And then it chokes me up, actually. It makes me want to cry. And then he said he came back again and asked for what he wanted in the Tlingit language. And he said, my daughter stopped what she was doing right there. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah.
So powerful. So powerful. That a child has been taught to see the value in speaking his language because it's going to get his needs met.
I ignore my children until they speak Tlingit. No. Yeah, no, I do remember that. It's been quite a process in teaching my kids Tlingit when they don't have anybody else to talk to. Like, there's not other Tlingit kids like running around trying to speak Tlingit with them. There's no space that just is held for Tlingit. There's not a demand for them to speak Tlingit. And so I speak as much Tlingit. Anything I know how to say in Tlingit, I will say it in Tlingit first, and then I'll try and act it out if I have time. If I don't, then I'll say it in English. Kind of goes like that. So their comprehension is really good. Like, I can say
Mhm.
to them and they know what I'm trying to say, but they do not respond back. And so
Mhm.
when they use Tlingit unprompted, like, they often repeat after me. Like, if we're telling stories or something, I'll say it after I do, and then they will. And or if we're playing language games, they will repeat after me. But it's so rare that they initiate the Tlingit, that they
Mm.
a moment like that
Mm.
is huge for me too.
Mhm.
So my promise is that anytime something like that happens, I stop everything I'm
Of course.
doing and they have my
Absolutely.
undivided attention. And now, like, Tlingit time, our intentional Tlingit language time, is some of our most connected time because
Mm.
they know that, like, I will not be picking up my phone or looking at my phone. I will not be distracted by adult conversations. I will not. That is such sacred time in our
Mhm.
family that they
Mhm.
know that they'll have my undivided attention. And so that's how I'm breaking through that piece about getting them to speak, is
Mhm.
that their experience for them.
And then there's a thing in the Paul Creek. It's the Paul Creek curriculum or Paul Creek methodology that COTS is using, and how do you say, not changing the core of it, but adapting to your situation. So I don't know if the idea of language nests is a part of that methodology, but I think that's where, like, I want to create a language nest in the kitchen down Nakano. Like I said that to Gatica already, that I want to try anyway. I mean, I know we're not going to be speaking fluent Tlingit, but the things we need to say in the kitchen, um, I want to learn how to say them so that we can work together in the kitchen. And then if people come into the kitchen, then they need to ask for what they need in the language. And so, can you share anything about the whole language nesting? Um,
Yeah, for sure. So we call it language domains,
mm,
and it's really a space that is designated for the language. And so
mm,
when we're in an environment that's English speaking, there's a call, there's a demand to speak English. It becomes the easier way to communicate, the most universal. Everybody knows it's inclusive, like, just by nature that everyone knows it. And so creating something that's not that is very challenging. And so we
Mm.
have some ideas around that, and some variations that you can do to create a language domain. And we have one being time. So like it could be like from 3 to 4 p.m. after school,
Oh.
that you have just a language hour, and then you say everything you can in the language. You take English out of the equation, and it forces you to learn new language
We
because
could
you
do
can't
that in the
really,
house. We could do that in the house, the time one. I
yeah,
had not thought of a language domain in the context of time.
yep.
Cool.
You could do it time, or you could do it location, so that
Mm.
it's like your kitchen space. And then it has like boundaries. If you have to say something in English, you literally have to walk outside the door and say the thing. Like it creates enough inconvenience that it's a demand for the language. And it
I love
forces
that.
you to stay in the language.
Yeah.
And then the other option is to have certain people that are your language domain. And so
Mm.
what me and my coworker and I have like this unspoken agreement that when we see each other in public, like not in a work setting, like
Mhm.
when we see each other, we'll speak in the language. And so
Mm.
it started at Khudeishéexh, one of our big cultural gatherings. And before we went for that one, I texted her and I was like, when I see you, I'm only going to speak Tlingit. She's like, okay, me too. And it was uncomfortable. Like a couple times I saw her and
Mm.
I was with somebody who was an elder who's Tlingit, who doesn't know the language. And it made me feel uncomfortable, like I was excluding them, right? Because I
Mhm.
had this promise. So when I saw her coming, I turned to my elder and I was like, just so you know, I have a promise with her that I'm only going to speak Tlingit to her. I'll tell you what we say after she goes. And so
Mm.
like, I had to find a way to
Right.
overcome the uncomfortableness of it in order
Mm.
to honor that promise. And so
Wow.
it's really creating those spaces with time, with location, or with people. And once you give your word to that, you have to get creative in how to fulfill that. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, like it's inconvenient enough that you have to have those conversations with people. Why it's important, why I'm doing this. I'm doing it for myself and my language and my children. Has nothing to do about you. Like you have to have those hard conversations so that people get used to the language existing in our day-to-day life.
And not make up a bunch of stories about it,
Yeah.
about what's happening. Like that's where you mentioned landmark briefly. Like that's the big thing that I've there's so much stuff I've gotten transformational education through that damn corporation. So I remember when you brought it to the community, and then we were at that picnic at Pike Bay, and then everybody was talking about it, and Watsay Brian had gone and he didn't like it, and then you were just talking about it, and you were like, "Oh yeah, you should go, Auntie. You'd be so confronted." And I was like,
Just with a big old smile too. You'd be so confronted.
which
Exactly.
I heard as, "Oh well, yeah, because you think there's something wrong with me that needs to be fixed. That's why I am be confronted." Anyway, but in the context of language, our languages were like the I often say that racism has been legalized in this country and remains so. Racism is legalized as it in respect to us as Indigenous people. That's what's happening and still happening. And so the languages were outlawed. And then children, small children who were fluent, were beaten for speaking their language for generations. So we all know that impact, and getting a like creating the potential, the space, the possibility that we will be fluent again in our languages is, oh my goodness, my Christian friends would say that's God's good work. And so it's like you're on the side of the angels. It's the work that needs to happen. I want this for my community of Barons River so bad. I'm working on enrolling a couple of young women because there needs to be language warriors. I call you guys language warriors. We're at war on several fronts. Go ahead. What were you
It's
gonna say?
a big part of healing. I think like
Mhm.
I'm unrecognizable from when I started my language journey.
Oh.
I was pregnant with my youngest when I started doing the language. And if you took a snapshot of me then, almost 5 years ago now, to today, not even the same person, unrecognizable. Like people from my past see me now and they're like, what happened? And I think it's the language. I know a huge part of it is the language and the community that's created around people who are committed to language. Like some of my
Mhm.
closest people are committed to reviving the language as well. And
Mhm.
that is an experience of healing in that, and growth and transformation and all the things. There's just things that can't be explained in English. And, you know, having access to that, it feels like it creates a need to be more connected to the people in my nation, to the land of my nation. Like it's
And it's almost like, I mean, I'm not a linguist or an expert or anything, but for me, my experience of even my own language, and I'm not fluent, I have enough Anishinaabe that I can understand, like general conversations. If people were to get really philosophical, I'm lost, then I ask, but anyway, the language is also, like what you said, there's things in Tlingit. I was impacted just now by what you said, that in that the okay, what am I trying to say? In When I'm in Barons River and there's lots of language being spoken still in little, it's like staticky radio, in little spots there you can be in the language, the words come with a feeling and an energy. It's like the words have a life of their own. And
mm,
when they're invoked, when they're spoken, it's like the concept of the word comes to life. It's not flat on a paper, and even English can come to life if it's really spoken with reverence. So it's like that with my lived experience of my own indigenous language, where I can just sit in that space, and even if I don't even know, maybe I know only 60% or 80% of what they're saying, I just feel cozy, and I can get the feelings that come along with it. And
mm,
sometimes I get colors, and sometimes I get like images, like, and so it's a whole textural thing. And that you said just now, as someone who didn't grow up listening to the language, that in your revitalization of your own language, there are things now already that you can't explain in English, just confirmed for me what I know, that those words have life. And when we speak them, they come into our space. Huh?
mm. Yeah,
That's so beautiful.
absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think I'm just on the brink of it. Like now,
Mm.
considered intermediate, not I think, we are considered intermediate speakers. And I still say that I'm speaking like the level of a 5-year-old, maybe, but I've been studying for 5 years. So it's appropriate that I'm at about a 5-year-old, especially considering that we don't have the immersion spaces and we have a lot of things stacked up against us. But now there's moments where I have Tlingit first, and then I have to be like, what did I just say? And then there was a
Mm.
moment, like, I don't know who's listening in, or if you talk about landmark, or,
Oh, yeah, go
if
ahead, talk
there's any
about that.
context about that.
Yeah. I
But
love you.
yeah, so with or participate with Landmark Worldwide, and it's like self-development and transformational programs, and it's reliable for that. You're like continuously, if you choose, you can continuously transform. And that's one of my life purposes. I'm always doing self-development and growth and transformation practices and stuff like that. And I'm in the wellness seminar right now, and
Mm.
we just had our one of our sessions, and they created that all of this story that I made about health and well-being. Like, consider myself a pretty healthy person, and I have a yoga practice, and I eat really healthy. I drink like 3 liters of water a day. Like, I have all these practices that are really good and healthy. But I have it like when I don't do those, that I'm bad, or I'm not on top of my life, or things are getting
Mm.
out of hand, or I'm drowning, or I'm overwhelmed. Like I have such a big story about it, and I make myself wrong for it. And so in this past week, past 2 weeks, I took over leadership of the dance group. We have 3 practices every 2 weeks. I ran a teacher's training for 9 language groups that are looking at taking on our curriculum, and 12 new teachers who are looking at teaching the curriculum. Like it has been such a big couple weeks for me. And I stopped all my healthy practices. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it's too much. I can't keep up and da da da, like just making myself wrong. And then in this conversation, all of a sudden, I got that those were just stories I made up. And it's just been weighing me down. And then the moment that I got that internal dialogue that just kept going round and round, there was nothing. There was just like empty space. And the first thing that came to mind was kudsiti we dis yachyati. And I was like, what is that? Like I had to like, and then what those words mean to me, and it might not be a direct translation, but it's like my existence is like the moon, or is the same as the moon, and it
Oh,
comes in cycles.
beautiful.
So there's moments where I get to prioritize myself, and I have time to do yoga and eat healthy and do all that. And then there's times where I'm making a difference and my life has a purpose, and I'm putting myself and putting my own needs aside temporarily so that I can make the difference I want. And then as soon as I got that, I'm like, okay, like look at what I accomplished in these last 2 weeks. That was so
Mhm.
worth giving up the yoga practice. And then the next day I did yoga. But it
Mhm.
took like actually giving up all those stories to be like, oh, this is part of the cycle. And that the first words that came to me in that moment were Tlingit, was like,
Mhm.
wow,
Beautiful.
it's part of my transformation now. My language
Yeah.
is going to help me through my own transformation and being the person that I want to be and that I'm meant to be in this
That's
lifetime.
so awesome. See, your spirit, I would say, how the story I'm making up is, I would say, your spirit is speaking to you in Tlingit now.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me on our last in-person dance group in Atlin,
Mhm.
I have a promise to say everything in Tlingit first and then translate for everybody. And I was saying, like, my mom is helping me and she's coming to dance practice with my kids. And I was like, we need a nickname for her because she doesn't have a Tlingit name. And the first thought in the morning of dance practice was Kakait Achi, and it's like loon song. And she's like,
Mm.
moon is her special animal and all
Yeah.
this. And I was telling everybody this. My first thought in my head, or the first thing I thought in my head this morning was Kakait Chi. And then I finished the story, translated in English. And then what Said, Uncle Brian, was like, that's a beautiful story, but it's not
Mm.
your sha, it's not your head, it's your spirit. And I,
Ah.
"Ach, tawoo ye yawaka." My spirit said Kakichi. So
Yeah,
I'm making that
yeah,
transition too, and
yeah.
acknowledging spirit has a
So
voice.
beautiful. So
Yeah.
your brother Vincent just commented saying, "I hope I can watch the rest of this incredible conversation later. I have to go snorkeling." He must be on holiday. He
He's
says,
ready
so,
to go.
Iksehan. Sorry about the
Oh,
spelling. Yeah.
fun. Aw, I love you too,
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah.
Iksehan too.
Yeah. So I just wanted to segue a bit back to the comment I made about the stories we make up about in the context of revitalization of language. Um, so the what's so for me, like the way it is for me, is that when I was in law school, I because I'm only conversational, like are you hungry, are you cold, and whatever, where are you from, like that. Uh, I did, I was learning about legal concepts and stuff, and I thought, well, these must be in our language too. So
Mm,
I phoned fluent speakers, and I soon realized that I had to phone about 5 or 6 before I'd get that feeling I talked about earlier about the concept, the idea, the fullness of the concept. Because our languages, what I understand about them is that they're conceptual and action based, and not noun, like not subject object based. They're more like, one time my dad said to me, no, he just joined us. My dad said to me, in Little Grand Rapids, Manitoba, the language is strong, and in back in the day it was even stronger. And he was laughing one day in the store, and I said to him, what are you laughing about, Dad? And he said, oh, he said, somebody just told me they invented a word for fax machine in Little Grand Rapids. And I was like, oh my God, what did they? And he said it, and it was like a whole big long sentence, which I understood some of it but not all of it. And I said, what did you say? And he said, they call the fax machine, the message comes invisible in the air into a machine, and then it comes out, and the white man writing on the paper. And that's fax machine, eh? So it's like very descriptive, conceptual. And so I called home, and somebody who loved me dearly and I loved, did that rude thing, and said, what do you care about talking Soto? You didn't care when we were kids.
Mm.
And what are you, a born again Indian? And I said, I guess so. I guess I am a born again Indian. I'm rebirthing myself here.
Mm.
And so she's such a fluent speaker. Oh my God. And so brilliant. And so I said, smarten up. I said, I'm just going to call somebody else. And she's like, okay, calm down. So she told me and then I would, from that experience, I learned there's 4 or 5 people that I sort of philosophical thinkers that I learned to consult with to get a bigger, rounder, fuller understanding. Because the language is also contextual, like situational. Like one word can mean, like in Tlingit, heen, is water, or it's the other day on that quiz you did, I did it wrong. River. It's
Yeah.
river.
Yeah.
It's water. And so it depends on what you're doing, And so, yeah. So
Yeah.
people make up stories is my point. You're reviving your language, you're powerfully impacting the world by doing that. Everybody at COTS is doing that. And there's going to be some people that personalize that and are threatened by that. Indigenous people, because they're not doing it. Or who knows what story they're making up. They're just making up their own damn story because they're having their life, you know?
Yeah. I think it really comes down to like personal integrity. Like
Mm,
create a life for yourself that you love. And
mm,
I wish that for everybody.
mm.
And if I'm getting negative responses from people about what I'm doing, like that shows a dissatisfaction with what they're doing. And I have compassion for that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like, I'm sorry that you're in a place that, you know, you
Mm,
can't see the excitement and the aliveness and the, you know, what's going on over here. And so I don't want people, I want to keep standing in that that's possible,
yeah.
and no matter what comes up from it, no matter how it triggers people, no matter what it brings up for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the commitments that I have is my life is a demonstration of what's possible. Like my mom is an artist and she raised me to believe that I can find my passion and find what I'm good at and what my gifts from creator are, and then make a career out of it. And
Mm-hmm.
because that's what she did with art. And so I just thought everybody does that. And I was like, cool, like, what are my gifts? Like, okay, like I can public speak, I could get up in front of a class and people and like, okay, that has value. Let me insert that here. Let me do this. I have a desire and like, I don't know, a deep core need to constantly take myself on and transform and grow and change. Like, okay, that's valuable. How am I going to include that? And so I don't know, I'm really grounded in my life and the life that I've created, that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And
Mm-hmm.
so it feels pretty unmessable, like
Love
I have
that.
I have people who question what I'm up to, and I'm like, I'm really happy with my life choices. So I think having that like internal groundedness and knowing is
Mm,
what carries through all those other hard conversations or
yeah.
triggered conversations.
Yeah.
And I experienced that. I mentioned a little earlier in the conversation that we just ran teachers training for anybody who's looking at taking on the Paul Creek curriculum, or adult fluency transfer system, they call it now. And it was so amazing. And just everybody who was there had, a commitment to reviving their language, whether it was Tlingit or Dunke or um, there was some people from Haida Gwa, there's some like Helsik, there was like
Yes,
no
and
languages. Yeah,
welcome home. Yeah.
yeah, Helpmane, yeah. And yeah, and so everybody just had such a commitment, and it really, my experience of it was everybody's in it. Everybody
Mm,
was like committed and in it and ready to take action and taking things on. And and then there was one person who was a visitor, and it drew up some things for this person, and it was confronting and it was hard. And
mhm,
instead of being like feeling attacked or feeling like it was something that I was doing wrong, I was like, okay, this is going to come up for everybody. In everybody's class, there's going to be people who get triggered by certain aspects because it's challenging. We're working through not only reviving a language, but healing as we do it, and unpacking certain triggers that we have with certain types of people or certain rules or regulations or whatever it is. And as we're doing that work, as we're learning a brand new language, like it's so multi-layered. And so it's almost like we need those people to have the space and ability to bring up those triggers and those moments of being uncomfortable, so that we can have the conversation that will move people through it.
mhm,
And so it's hard to see it that way in the moment sometimes, but that's my commitment. That's what I'm working towards.
mhm,
It's like finding
mhm.
a way that to find the value in what comes up for people, because they're not
Yeah.
the only person. Like,
Yeah.
we want our whole nation to be speaking our language. That means nobody left behind. That means everybody. So we need to find a way to reach people who seem unreachable. We
Yeah.
need to find a way to make it inclusive enough that people who feel like they don't belong find their way there.
Ah.
And we don't have that yet. We're just creating the space for it. And so
Mhm,
learning as we go, for sure.
mhm. Yeah, like I said, I just wish this so bad for my home community. I wish this for so many communities because it's a methodology that, I swear in life. So this is not the kind of podcast where we're all perfect. But my dear old dad used to say, money talks and bullshit walks. So the results, like we can have all the conversation we want about language methodologies. But if we're not ending up with fluent speakers, well, yeah, that was interesting. And
Hmm.
so I think that's a difficult space to be in because we've gotten so used to checking the box, oh yeah, we have native language classes, and many of the teachers, like in my community, like, I mean, Alma Sinclair, she was a rock. Like she was a champion for the language. Like if you would have given Alma a methodology like this, no one would have lost their language in Barons River or be anywhere near losing it. So it's a methodology that really produces fluency. Prove
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
So, if you want a six pack, you got to do the sit ups. That's just how it is. You know, I wanted to just also say that, I can't, I'm so happy with the transformational. I thank you for I don't know if you were clueless or brave or what. We didn't really know each other much back then, but when you said, "Oh my God, yeah, you should go," you'll be so confronted.
Probably clueless.
And I
I
have
was just unleashed too. I was
yeah,
like,
you were so unleashed, like just enrolling everybody, yeah, bring your dog, whatever. And so I'm in that space too still. Like I have benefited so much. And I am my intention is to create a life of my own design, not in response to circumstance. Huh? You know?
wonderful.
And so, you know, where I'm at with that is I'm in the leadership training program now, which you've been in like long ago. I could see all of the things you learned too in the handling of that moment with the person who was a residential school survivor, and I had brought up that issue, which opened the door for him. And I was like, "Oh no, that's not what I meant to happen," but it was happening. And and he was like, "I'm glad you brought that up because that's how I'm feeling," and blah, all over the place. And then 3 or 4 people also said, "Yeah, I'm really worried." And how you handled that was so perfect. Like
Mm.
nobody, you didn't make anyone wrong. Like it was, and I know you got that from your transformational education.
Thank you. All the work paid off. You don't feel it in the moment always, but
No, no, it was so smooth. Like I just thought, wow, okay, that's what I want to be able to do. And
yeah.
I this is my 4th time registering in the leadership training program, and the 3 other times I've withdrawn because I was just too confronted. And
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong. Like it just wasn't what I was prepared to do, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And this time, of course, I'm still confronted, and what I'll just we're running out of time, but I just want to end with this is what I'm discovering. And this is an Indigenous podcast, so this is a brave Indigenous conversation. So we just visit and ramble about whatever. I don't know what the hell we're going to talk about. We'll talk about it. And so what I've discovered on weekend 1 and 2 is that while I'm not a victim of, let's say, um, trigger warning right now, but I'm not a victim of having been raped, any longer. Like I don't see the world, you know, through that lens. And so there's lots of personal things I've overcome, domestic violence, or I've moved through, or whatever. So I had it like I wasn't a victim anymore and that I was a champion. And what I discovered was that I had just, uh, it's like when you have moose roast the night before and then you turn it into a really great soup tomorrow, you know?
Still moose, still
It's
moose.
still moose. So what I discovered was that my victimization, my victim mentality, you know, was just transformed into champion, speaker, helper, blah, 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 you know?
Mm,
And that was still all in the there's something wrong and something needs to be fixed world, and not at all in the world of what's possible.
mm.
Yeah.
Well, it never ends, right? That would
I
be so
know.
boring if you get transformed once and you're like, all right, I'm done now. Now I'm an elder. Like, no. It's like, and the beautiful thing is like my experience with transformation is you experience a transformation, you get this insight where you're like, what? How could I have never seen that before? And
Mm,
then your life alters and you end up
mm,
taking on more things and creating
mm,
another aspect of your life that you love or you're expanding. And
mm.
then you have the next roadblock. Then you get
Yeah.
confronted by something else. And I think, I mean, this is my personal belief, that's what life is all about. I
Hello.
think we're put on this world to get certain lessons. You're
Mhm.
either going to overcome them or we're going to have to repeat again and learn them in even harsher ways. I always say that my lessons come in threes if I'm not paying attention. Like it
Right.
will be time to notice something and the lessons will get fiercer and fiercer until it's intolerable. And
Yeah.
then I'm like, all right, I need to like take care of this.
Yeah.
And my experience is like, I hope that never ends because I think I'll be dead then.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so
I think
that's why like like not just with landmarks programs, I do keep participating, but I do keep reading and challenging
Yeah.
myself.
Oh, yeah.
People in my life are showing up who are also doing that kind of work. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's what life is all about.
Mm.
And yeah, I hope I keep growing and changing and keep getting confronted. I have this thing that I don't know if it's I don't know, a strength or a weakness, but as soon as things get good, like just easy, I'm like, wow, I'm killing this mom thing. Like I nailed that. Like my work stuff, I'm on top of it. Like look at all these check marks in my bullet journal. Like as soon as I'm doing really good, I'm like, time to take on the dance group and take on the next big thing that blows the lid off. And then I'm like woohooing, we say, like just doggy paddling and
Yeah.
getting back on top of it. But
Yeah.
like that's the thing. It's like you keep expanding and growing and making a difference. And I see you
100%.
doing that too. Like,
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like,
Yeah.
taking on the next thing all the time.
Yeah.
And when I was I did that leadership course you're talking about when I was, I don't know, maybe 22 or 23.
Wow.
And I was like, same thing. Should I do it or not? It was 9 months at the time. And I was like, that's way too long. How could I commit to that? Like, it sounds crazy. And I went to a psychic and she said, for the next 9 months of your life, you're going to create the foundation of your leadership for the rest of your life.
Wow.
I was like, oh, okay, I'll sign here. Like registered. But it takes something when you're on the brink of taking on something new that's going to challenge you and confront who you wound up being. It's one of
Mm.
the scariest moments.
Mm.
And then you just commit anyways and find a way through. That's got to be
Mhm.
the of life.
That's the juice, man. That's the juice. That's the your uncle would say that's the bone marrow.
The bone marrow. Oh, this really is an Indigenous
The
conversation.
the best part. Okay, so we promised we'd end on time. We have 3 minutes, so and before I'd like you to have the last word. So I just want to say life is all about beaded earrings. As you know, I'm a beaded earring addict. These were made by Becky Ann, those of you who are watching on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, and she's amazing. You can find her on Facebook, just Becky, second word Ann, and she's one of the best beaters I've ever met, and they're light. All right. There you go, Becky Ann. And what do you have to say as your last closing?
Um, well, thank you for having this conversation with me. And it was very interesting coming on and being like, I have no idea what we're going to talk about, and just giving the space of for life and
Mm,
how we as Indigenous people are finding our way through and finding a way to make a difference, and holding spaces for these conversations is really important. So thank you for
mm.
creating the space, Auntie.
Oh, miigwech. Well, it was an absolute honor to have you here, and I'm really, uh, I don't know, like I love watching you and watching you, like you said, take on the next thing. And I was saying to my son-in-law, Steve, the other day, I said, I think life is like this. You climb, you climb, you climb. I said, like on the trail, like he hunts a lot. I said, like when you're out in the mountains, you're climbing up a ravine, and if you're lucky, you'll get to a pine flat. And then you walk along for a while. Whew, this is nice. I'm good. And then, oh, gotta climb again, eh? And that's just how life is.
Yeah.
Sometimes those spots where it's good walking are longer, you know? And sometimes they're like, I don't know. When you're going with your Uncle Brian in the bush, you could be in the next ravine in 15 minutes. It's like, oh my God, don't go any shortcuts with him. Okay, my
But we
dear.
get to amazing places, though.
Oh yeah, I've seen some amazing things in the territory with him. Yeah, and walked there on my own 2 feet. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna end our thing and then we'll say goodbye off air. Okay, thanks you everybody for listening. And I'm not very professional about this, but please share it. Like if you whenever you do listen to it, please share it on your own media. And you can find me on Spotify, Brave Indigenous Conversations with Joan Jack. And yeah, let's blow this up. Joe Rogan, move over.
Thank you for having